I thought of you as soon as I saw this thing. I'm hyped for it because the N64 is one of my favorite systems of all time. But I know this is going to be too expensive. The Analog 3D. First off, you were probably relieved that it wasn't another Analog Pocket with like stickers on it or something.
Exactly.
It's something new. What was your reaction to the Analog 3D? And actually, before you give your reaction, tell people what this thing is.
Yeah, so it's a new console they're working on. They say it's going to come out in 2024. They're just showing like really shadowy images, so we can't really see what it is yet. You know, they are making a new controller for it too, but it is focused on Nintendo 64. Initially, when I saw it, I was like, oh, great. This will be a nice home console FPGA. We'll be able to use like the Analogue's OS, like software, open FPGA, to be able to play other games on it too. And so it'll be like basically a home consoleized Mister that has all of the configuration set up. And I was like, that sounds great. Super Nintendo, you know, Nintendo games, and then also Nintendo 64. That'd be awesome. And then I read the fine print, which is in a gray font on a black background, so you can barely see it. And they say it will only play cartridges. We're not going to be able to play ROMs. It's not going to support open FPGA. And so I'm like, I'm not going to pay, because this thing's going to be expensive. It's probably be $400 or $500. And I'm like, I'm not paying that much to just be able to have HDMI out on a Nintendo 64.
He's ruined my day.
Sorry.
I didn't read that fine print.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, it's got 4K output on the HDMI. It's probably going to look pretty good, right?
No, not Nintendo 64
because
games.
those polygons are still going to look bad.
Yeah, exactly. And so,
and if it's FPGA, then there's not going to be any like widescreen hacking, right? Like that's not.
Yeah, I don't think so. I don't know enough to know what they've done with the Mister Core, because they're working on Mister Core for it. You know, they've been working on it for a while. I haven't tested it yet. I have a Mister. Still haven't unboxed it, unfortunately. But yeah, I can't imagine they're going to be adding hacks like that, especially because it's not really Analog's MO. They're just like, hey, you can play your game the way it was meant to be played, you know, and that's like it. And so I don't see it. Yeah, unless they have workarounds embedded in it, we find out later that, yeah, you can do open FPGA, but you got to press this button or whatever, you know, the little things that they do where they get it hacked, the console hacked or whatever. I'm hoping that is a factor and that we will have that sometime in the future. But if not, to be honest, Nintendo 64 catalog is not something for me. It's worth spending that much money on.
Before you mentioned...
well, they did that in with the Analog Pocket, right?
Exactly.
So, like, it came out and it was... like you could only do cartridges, and then they did a firmware update and they were like, all right, now you can do your SD card if you want.
Yeah. And so, but the thing is, they didn't ever come out and say with the Analog Pocket that they were not going to support open FPGA. That was something they said that they were going to have in it. You know what I mean? And so that's what has me thinking is that maybe they won't do it, is because they're already from the get-go saying no. I don't know. We'll see.
It's a... I don't know. They're in a weird spot. I'd have to agree with everyone. Like when I first saw it, I was like, how much is this thing going to be? And I don't know. I mean, it's really cool and all, but there's that new RetroTink 5K, 5X,
right.
Which is using that new FPGA that is looking fantastic with putting old consoles in and then upscaling. And it's looking fantastic. And I keep on seeing updates and where the dude is like having it auto detect, so no one has to really even go into profiles and stuff to like change whatever it is. So he showed it working on Symphony of the Night on PS1 and how it auto detected it, and I was like, dude, this thing is looking fantastic, more and more better by the day. So it's like, I'm looking at that and I'm like, man, with just a super nice OLED, you don't need CRT, you can just have this. And I already have a really nice OLED, so this is already like ticking all the boxes for me, where I might just get the new RetroTink. The new Analog 64 thing, I'll wait and see. I still have, I have like 60 N64 games, like physical N64 games, and I also have the EverDrive 64. I actually have my N64 plugged in over there. What's funny is my son just recently started playing Super Mario 64. Whenever I say anything's really cool, even when he was a little kid, anything I said was cool was not cool, and what YouTuber he liked said was cool, he would do it. And then he saw like the Super Mario reverse jump, whatever that's called, up the steps and stuff, and he's like, oh, I got to do that. So I put in my Super Mario 64 cart, and it still has all my saves still working. So I did 120 stars on two different profiles, and I was like, oh yeah, I got my 120 stars on both of them. And he looked at me, he was like, And I was like, that's right, gamer cred.
That's right. That's right.
I was like, I did that when I was your age. So then he started playing through it. So I have my original N64 still hooked up with my original Super Mario 64 cartridge in it. So I was huge on Super Mario this 64, the N64. So in one part, I'm really happy for it, but I don't really like the direction that Analogue has done with anything that they've been doing. I still don't own anything that they've never made. I do like the idea of FPGAs in general, but there's still something that needs to be programmed, right? So there are still some things that they borrow from other stuff, and you still have some not hardware specific things that should be happening. So there's errors that still happen, and they patch them up and stuff. So I still love the idea of an FPGA, insofar as like you don't care about frequency or anything, right? You're basically trying to make it operate like a Super Nintendo or operate like an Amiga. So it does one Amiga operation per second, or it does one Super Nintendo operation per second when you switch it up, which is really awesome. But then again, that RetroTink, the new RetroTink, I think is something I care about a little bit more. Yeah.
One thing I was confused by with the Analog is that everybody seems excited about the controller, and I thought we came back around. I thought the Trident controller was the way to go. Are people not into the Trident controller again? Has it swung back? What happened?
Well, this one's in a shadow, so there's that. I think
Yeah,
I
you
think
can
it
only
looks
see
cool.
the face buttons. Yeah.
Yeah.
It looks to me like they're partnering with
8-Bit
8-Bit
Dough.
Dough.
Yep.
Because if you look at it, you can see just barely, and I should put this on screen, but you can just barely see the 8-Bit Dough little heart thing.
Right.
If you're looking carefully, just to the, like right at the middle, you can just barely see that little 8-Bit Dough heart. Now, I don't follow enough 8-Bit Dough stuff to know whether or not this is an existing controller, but I think it looks fantastic. And
So there's a connection between them too. So the CEO of Analogue, like if you go to his website, it says marketing director or marketing lead of 8-Bit Dough. I don't know if that's previous or present or whatever, but they've got a connection between the two of them.
Interesting.
Yeah, and if you get the Analog Pocket dock, like it specifically like has compatibility with 8-Bit Dough controllers. Like they have them listed out which ones they support. So there is definitely some sort of partnership going on there, I think.
See, the reason I'm interested in this mostly is because I don't have to deal with configuring Jack. I've run into so many issues where, like, I bought the 8-Bit Dough Sega Mega Drive controller, and I have a Super Nintendo style controller, and my emulation system is like, I don't know what to do with these things unless I reconfigure it every single time. And if you've ever tried dealing with an N64 controller to get that authentic feeling experience, it's always kind of a nightmare because it had such a weird face button layout. So, like, this means that I can just plug it in, put in my copy of Blast Core or whatever, and play, and that's going to be really, really fun. But the fact that it only plays cartridges and is going to be stupidly expensive because, like, paying $250 to play your Game Boy games is ridiculous. I'm sure that that's high build quality. I haven't had it in my hands, but is it $250 worth of build quality? I don't know. So who knows how much this thing's going to cost. It looks cool though, and that's why I'm excited about it, because I like to get excited about stuff.
For sure.
Speaking real quick, this is like nothing to do with anything, but did any of you guys, when you were kids, take the Trident controller and pretend you were Wolverine? Just like,
I love that, but no, I never did that. But
I always
love
used to
that.
put it like right here. And they're like, oh yeah, chunky.
I've never
My
actually
mother
held-
had a. Go ahead.
I was gonna say I've never held a Nintendo 64 controller. I missed
Really?
that whole generation, so
Oh,
I've
man.
never
Better
actually even
off.
played it. I've only played
We're-
emulation on it.
Were you out of the generation entirely, or like were you into PS1? Or
I had a
anything
little
like
bit
that?
like I had a
girls.
friend who had PS1. Yeah, but it was all
Girls.
girls and sports at the time, and so I had
For
a friend with
sure.
PS1. We played some of the games on that, but that was it. I didn't play any of the other stuff. Never even touched Nintendo 64.
Yep.
It's a terrible controller. I don't know whoever thought it was a good idea, but it led to so many innovations that were important that I'm glad that it exists, even though I hope we never revisit that ridiculous thing again because it was bad.
Yeah,
That's fair.
The Rumble Pack came out with it.
Yep.
The analog stick. It did a number of things that were really important, and that still carried on forward.
And I know we give the credit to Alien, but it had dual analog for GoldenEye.
Right.
If you use that scheme, yeah. So
That
there's
was
that
something
too.
that I learned a long time later.
Yep.
Yeah, I never played that in the moment where with the two. For those of you who are watching this who have no idea, you could play a first-person shooter, GoldenEye 007, with two N64 controllers, one in each hand, and each one had one trigger and each one had a thumbstick, and it was like having two thumbsticks on a controller. I don't know anybody in real life
No,
that ever actually did that.
didn't know it
but
was
you
impossible.
could.
Yeah.
You could.
Or maybe you couldn't. Maybe it's one of those things like you guys were talking about, like unlocking Akuma.
Right.
Well, I was actually huge on the N64. There was an import shop that was really close to where I lived, and because Japanese N64 came out like a year early, I got a chance to play Super Mario 64 like a year early, like not too much, but I was waiting. And then Blockbuster had an N64 in their kiosk thing like 6 months before, and I would go there all the time to play it. I was huge on the N64, even though it only had 2 games when it first came out for like ever.
You guys might know I had a VHS. Was that from Nintendo Power? I had a VHS for Mario 64, like before the Nintendo 64 was out, and it was just like a demonstration of the game, like to get me excited. And there was like a wireframe of the controller on the box of the VHS. It was amazing. I have no idea where I got that from.
Even though I was more of a Nintendo head during the Sega Nintendo generation, I never subscribed to Nintendo Power. I was always Game Pro and EGM.
Oh.
That was it. That was all the magazines I ever had.
Yeah. I've got to find out what this tape is. When I Google it, it's just rare Mario 64 tape worth lots of money, and you made a mistake throwing that out.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah. And now
now
everybody tries to keep everything in case it retains its value, but because everybody does that, it never ever
Right.
gets that value.